Hello. I think this is like episode 247 of The Crate and Crowbar, but I'm committed now and I can't be bothered to check. My name is Chris Thurston, and tonight I'm joined by Philippa Waugh.
Hi.
Hello.
What? Why do you not know what's going on? That's my thing.
I know, I thought I'd catch a march on you.
Well, I think it's episode 454.
Excellent.
What are you going to do about it?
Nothing, because I'm not in a position to contradict you. It's just you and I this evening, and it is pretty late at the time that we're recording this on account of Develop and The Football stealing our various ordinary pod co-hosts from us. They're not ordinary. They're all extraordinary in their own individual ways. But
Usual.
Yeah, and usual.
Regular.
Typical. Regular. Yeah. Nothing regular about this because there's no news again. When will there be news again?
Well, I've just come off deadline. England have just crashed out of the World Cup. And I have wine. So
good,
let's just get this done.
We're nailing down facts.
Yes.
The football is staying away. Will not be coming home. But that's okay, because home's a mess.
They will be coming home, though.
They are allowed to come home, yeah.
In their waistcoats.
Well. Yeah. They did very well, the football men.
Yeah.
Uniformly well. But not as well as it's possible to do, which is why a lot of people are upset.
There is a skill ceiling on that one that we did not quite... I don't know.
It's never been broken through in my lifetime. This is a very familiar kind of feeling for me.
Same.
Brought me back to being 3 and 9.
Yeah. I remember kneeling on the floor in my living room in 1996 on an England flag, watching the penalties as that whole farrago unfolded. Gareth Southgate was there, as he was this evening.
Yeah, indeed.
But,
these reboots, where they get one member of the original cast back to just sort of play a
I
role.
will say he seemed lovely.
He absolutely does. I mean,
I was quite fond of him with how he handled the 96 stuff, what with, making a profit by doing a Pizza Hut advert afterwards, where Stuart Pearce mocked him, I do believe. But yeah, although, yes. I don't have much for this. Shall we just scrap this section and move on?
It's far too late for that now. The real football was the friends we made along the way. That's the end of it.
Edit this out.
No, I absolutely refuse. Partly because one of the reasons I have to refuse to edit that out is because it's probably going to also be a little, not simply because it's the two of us, but also a little shorter podcast than usual on account of the fact that I haven't played anything new. I was scanning through new games. I've just played Moon Crash. And given that we dedicated a big chunk of the last podcast to Moon Crash.
Did you?
Yeah. Yeah, you weren't there.
No. Where was I? I was having dinner. That was nice.
You went out for dinner, and me, Tom, and Alex sat in a room and talked about Prey Moon Crash, which is very good. I like it a lot.
I stand by my decisions.
But I appreciate that, you don't want to tread that ground for the first time.
No.
And I don't want to retread that ground. That's too much Moon Crash. So instead, what we should do...
Does the moon crash?
No. There is some crashing. It's set on the moon. And some things do crash. You also use a computer system that crashes. So...
But the moon doesn't crash?
No.
Okay.
No, it doesn't. It's moon-themed crash events.
Is there a metaphor involved?
I think it's just a cool word.
Crash.
It
or
is.
moon?
Both.
Moon crash.
Moon crash.
Snow crash.
Exactly, right? Because it's got a very cyberpunky kind of thing. You're a hacker
Okay.
in a virtual reality simulation that's very snow crashy.
Hell crash.
Indeed, if you were
Shoe crash.
that could be the Doom version. That could be the shoe version.
Beatles crash.
That would be the Beatles version.
Okay.
I actually tried this on the
Sky crash? That's a James Bond film. It must be.
It's not, but is there a James Bond film?
Well, there's Skyfall.
There is, yeah. Does the sky fall in Skyfall? No,
yes.
It doesn't. It's just the name of a place.
Is it?
Yeah.
I wasn't paying attention.
If anything, a man gets shot out of an ejector seat into a helicopter, which is the opposite of the sky falling.
That's not what...
Look, I'm challenging you to a game of opposites. The opposite of the sky falling is being shot out of a car.
No, the opposite of the sky falling is a tidal wave. It's the sea rising. Thank you.
I always thought the ground was the opposite of the sky, not the sea. Because the sea is in some ways a reflection of the sky. There's a kinship.
Have you not been listening to my opposites?
No, I mean, I have.
And why do you not have an instinctive understanding of how correct I am?
As
right
ever,
now?
the opposite of you is me. So,
It was Tom.
no, you're more alike than you are different.
He's in develop. I'm not in develop.
That's
so
true.
far, so opposite.
What's the opposite of Bath, Brighton? Let's talk about video games.
Okay.
Okay, and let's talk about the video games you've been playing, because you've played quite a bit since
I have.
you were last on the podcast.
Yes. Which one do you want?
I thought it would be fun to start with Captain Spirit.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Interesting. I was not expecting that.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought there were 2 games on the list and that was one of them.
Well, I mean, I've played. Okay, so to give people a contents page, I have played The Sims 4 Seasons, if you wanted the specific flavour, but you know.
Yeah.
I've played The Amazing Adventures or Awesome Adventures. It's one of the adventures of
The
Captain
Adequate
Spirit.
Adventures of Captain Spirit.
Yes. And Shape of the World, I've played that. I've played Cognizer. I've played Dr. Frank's Build-A-Boyfriend.
Wow.
I've played Ashi Lake of Light.
How do you spell Ashi in that?
Ashi.
Ashi. Okay.
A-S-H-I.
Okay.
So it's been all go, really.
It
all
has.
go.
Well, let's start with Captain Spirit, because you played so many games, you don't have to go.
I'm papering over your inadequacies.
Well, I was
With
just
my
going on the
wife.
ones you mentioned. Let's not fight. The children are here. Yes, so Captain Spirit is the free prologue to Life is Strange 2.
It's what would have been a demo disc in my day.
Or a shareware version.
Yes. But anyway, so it's kind of it is a free mini-sode, I guess, that is a teaser for Life is Strange Season 2, or Life is Strange 2, rather. So it's kind of set in the same world, and, you know, it's got all the same sort of trappings. It's got the indie plinky plonky soundtrack and, like, the long establishing shots and, you know, the same lovely art style, and the same sort of, sensitive sensibility, I guess. But this time it focuses on a 10-year-old boy called Chris, who is very much into superhero sort of stories and comic books and things, and his family situation. He lives with his dad, and you know that all is not necessarily well. And so it's about essentially like navigating the world as him and living sort of, I guess, choosing how much or how wholeheartedly you embrace the superhero side of his way of coping with the world. And that's, you know, it's interesting. It does tip over into sentimentality, I thought, a fair old bunch. But, you know, it's fine. But I loved Life is Strange. And I think that meant that the things that it didn't do very well, because I really resonated with, that story really resonated with me, and the characters did. So it meant that the things that, if you're not that invested with the story, would chafe quite a bit more. It meant that they weren't as much of a concern. You know, you still notice them. But they weren't as much in the forefront. Whereas this, it didn't really ever resonate in that way. And so I found myself more aware of shortcomings, and also at points it didn't really feel like it had quite earned the emotions it was trying to provoke, as in it's such a loaded situation, you know, a small kid and the potential for him to be disappointed by a heavily drinking parent just before Christmas. It's,
right.
It's such a kind of emotionally charged setup that I feel like when a game does that, it has to work hard to feel like it deserves the emotions it can reap off the back of that, rather than feel like it's just tapping into the situation for those.
Yeah.
And like at some points it does manage moments where that pierced through, but they were moments where the developers felt like they were employing more of a light touch, and the moments where it was a lot more heavy-handed felt they didn't feel as natural. They felt quite mawkish was the word that kept coming to mind.
The original Life is Strange has some mawkishness in it in places, but I guess it's in the context of a much denser experience.
I think it benefits from having a lot longer to unfold. And I also think that I actually enjoyed the fanfic-esque quality of the original. It felt like I was genuinely glad to see a thing that seemed to be referencing a strand of fiction that I remembered being really into as a teenager, and that gaming in general has sort of not engaged with. It felt, I think I've maybe said this on a podcast before, but it did feel like one of the first times I recognized an experience as mirroring my own in games. And, you know, I think I mentioned that in a written piece, because I think someone commented, like, almost in a kind of suggesting that there was something wrong with me, that, or, you know, that they pitied that
This is relatable.
Yeah, and it was that struck me as weird, but I guess I'm so used to playing games that put me in someone's shoes where I can empathize with them, but I don't recognize any of myself in that, or any of the things that I grew up being really into in that. And so to sort of suddenly see it in a mainstream, you know, big game was really, I think you can't underestimate what that means to people. And I'm not saying that it allowed me to ignore points where the original Life is Strange fell short, but it definitely meant that they weren't at the forefront of my mind. You know, you can be aware of things, but if something is personally meaningful, then they just aren't as important.
Yeah, I think I felt the same way, even though obviously those characters in that situation in Life is Strange was not going to be as resonant of my own experience as being a teenager. It was still, you know, reminiscent of a side of fiction that doesn't get represented enough in games. There's a few different ways in which it was pointedly different, both sort of formally and in terms of its content. That I think really stands out, and that's the thing that sort of like makes me. I haven't played Captain Spirit. I'd like to, I think, but it's interesting because on paper I should have a pretty quick through line to relating to the game, because I was once a 10-year-old boy called Chris who was really into superheroes. But thinking about it, that's like possibly the least interesting part of my life to simulate. So I suppose my question would be, for me, it seems like it would throw up lots of issues to go from playing, a teenager with problems and limitations, but a lot of agency relative to how much agency you have, both intellectually and also, you know, very literally as a kid.
It's a different experience, although, I mean, in some ways, how much agency does Max have? Because you do a lot of things like fiddling around with time until you get the outcome that you want, or the outcome that the game will let you proceed with. You know, you have a certain amount of choice within that, but there is still the constraints of the story to consider.
I suppose what I mean is not literal game agency, but like how much of an kind of implied internal complexity, and therefore kind of, you know, room to grow, that kind of thing that you can put on a character.
There are some elements that I thought were good on that front, because there are things like, so you're in this house, and it's snowing outside. So, you trying to find things to do while your dad watches sports on the TV. And so, some of it is that you can choose to do a certain amount of household tasks. And I found that quite interesting because I chose to play Chris as somebody who would take on the parts of the running of the household that would try and paper over his dad's inability to do that. And so... that was kind of an interesting balancing act about, how much you choose to take on as him, that kind of how much you put on Chris to have grown up early, I guess, or to have to take responsibility. And there are also things where, so Captain Spirit is kind of his superhero alter ego. And so as you go through the game, you have the option of, as you interact with elements of your environment, you can press E on PC to perform them in the superhero option, almost like, when you're, going around the house and you do something as if there's an audience, or, my go-to example is that you throw something into the bin from across the room and you pretend that it was like, the winning, I don't know, basket in a match, right? And so you sort of, you do the thing and it's like, and the crowd goes wild, and you pretend to cheer for yourself, there's kind of that sense of play acting almost, of, dipping into this fantasy world to escape, but also just because it's quite a human thing to do as you potter about,
Captain Spirit is a very wholesome name for a 10-year-old's self-invented superhero alter ego.
I can't remember whether it's because it's been a little while and I've played a bunch of things since. I can't remember whether it's that it was the name of an in-game universe fictional hero that, that he happened to read the comic books of, because I think a lot of the enemies and stuff that he talks about maybe come from the books. There's little characters that he can pick up and play with as he potters about in his room and things like that, and he draws pictures and, that kind of thing.
That would definitely gel close with my experience of being Chris, which would have been, you can perform the action as yourself, but you can also perform it as Spider-Man.
Exactly. It's a bit like when I was very freelance and I had been playing a lot of Call of Duty, I think, and I decided to pretend that I was in a sort of Black Ops mission and tried to get from my room to, I don't know, I think the living room without the cat noticing me. And I managed to, I think I fell off the banisters or something onto the stairs, and that was, the cat just kind of looked over and it was like,
that's all over.
There's just such scorn.
Yeah.
Such scorn from that cat. So
that was a particularly scornful cat, though, if I'm thinking of the same cat.
Not either.
Oh, a different one.
It was the one, I can't remember her name. She had a Spanish name.
Oh, I was going to...
Because my housemate was Spanish, obviously.
Well, we may never know.
It's fine.
Yeah. So, I guess because it's free, how substantial is that Captain Spirit? Like, as a thing? Is it a self-contained story? Is it very much chapter 0?
I feel like it's like half the length of a normal Life is Strange episode, maybe.
Right.
So it's, you get a fair amount of hashtag content, but also, I think that, and I don't think this is a spoiler, but if you, I suppose I was going to say, if you want to go in knowing nothing, maybe you shouldn't have listened to the past like 10, 15 minutes. But it ends by saying you can meet Chris again in Life is Strange 2. And so it's one of those things where I felt like the implication was that you don't play him, but that he pops up
Right.
somewhere in that universe and that maybe your paths cross, but there isn't really a sense of to what extent the events of, especially the end of the episode, reflect what actually happens in that series and how much it's just a sort of teaser. I know that there's supposed to be a lot of stuff that people can puzzle over if they want to, and I found quite a lot of references to things like, you know, locations and things in the first game and things, but I've always been terrible with anything approaching like an ARG or a guessing game, because, you know, I do have a few ideas for who I think might be in the upcoming thing, because I think Don't Nod teased that perhaps people could figure out who was going to be the protagonist of the second Life is Strange from playing that, but I would say there didn't feel like there was a conclusive it will be this person or anything. It's more that I have, like, there are a couple of things which I took to be clues, which will probably turn out to be absolutely wrong in retrospect, that I decided would be my guess for it, but I am well-establishedly terrible at this stuff, so...
I think, and I haven't played it and I don't know anything about it, I think...
But that's not going to stop me wading in.
My opinion is that you are going to re-encounter Chris as a depressed 55-year-old divorcee. And it'll be set in the future. Unless it turns out that Captain Spirit was set in the past.
Okay.
That's my guess.
Right.
It's probably not the case. But that's my guess. I mean, the whole thing's about time travel, right?
Well, I mean, the first Life is Strange had a time rewinding element to it, but I mean...
I'm talking big rewinds. Encounter anybody as a baby and anybody as a depressed 55-year-old divorcee, and those are the two settings every character has.
What's wrong with you? What's happened today?
Find out in the prologue DLC.
Has the football really got to you?
No, not at all. It's just quite hot. And I was
like,
trying
well,
to figure
they're
out...
a young team in 55 years.
Trying to figure out what other forms of strangeness could be in Life is Strange. And I was trying to figure out what the most unusual thing to do with that character would be in the potential sequel, rather than having him literally show up as a child. You know?
I mean, making him the Chancellor of the Exchequer. You could just pick loads of things out of...
Sure, why not?
I mean, he could turn into a giant, like, pill bug.
He could, yeah. In Franz Kafka's Life is Strange, which is the other name for that story.
Exactly.
It is real weird when that happens.
Yeah.
It's freaky. That'd be a good power to introduce to Life is Strange. You can do mid-conversation, you can transform into a beetle.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
To see if that gives you different conversation options.
I'd like that.
And it almost always would.
Yeah, but he can't talk back, can he?
No, he can't. But
Grigor.
Yeah, but you can just sort of skitter and go...
Yeah, but then you just get hit by a broom by your mum.
But sometimes that might be desirable. It depends on what the solved scenario is.
I feel like you might need to do a bit more work on this pitch.
Okay. All right, well, we can come back to it.
We'll just circle round to that one again.
Because I know, I don't know if they're going to stick with the time travel thing or if it's just going to be... You know, I'm trying to find a high concept.
The thing is, I don't really want to spoil it for people who haven't played.
Fair enough.
So we
have spoiled that you don't turn into a giant beetle.
Have I?
Have we?
I'm just saying that yours didn't make sense.
Okay.
Your idea.
There are other implementations of that idea that make perfect sense.
Well, and also, you know... anyway. So, anyway, I think there are things that we could discuss if this was more of a spoiler-full thing. Or maybe if you'd played it, but I think
Sure.
It's the sort of thing where that's the extent to which I would take it for people who haven't played or who were thinking of playing.
Fine. Let's talk about a different game in that event. How's about them Sims? So Seasons is a very new expansion, right?
It is.
And quite a big expansion?
Yeah, it's the one that costs like 35 quid, I think.
That's big game money.
Sorry, I'm just really trying hard to swallow a Jolly Rancher chew whole. Which defeats the point of the chew, I will say. Anyway, goodness, that's really sticking in my throat.
Have a glass of wine and I will talk about The Sims for at least 15 seconds. Is that better?
Yes, The Sims 4 Seasons is...
Not The Sims 4 Seasons, which is a pizza.
That didn't deserve that laugh. I retract it. Rescind this. So, the Sims 4's Seasons expansion is essentially, it adds seasons to the game, and it adds things like holidays that recur over the course of that yearly cycle, as well as things like, you know, weather changes that tie into that. It adds it fleshes out the gardening career path, which was very good news for me. It adds a bunch of, you know, clothes options and stuff like that, as these things usually do. And it brings beekeeping, which means
That is also
I
good news for you.
been stung an awful lot. Or rather, Loretta Hewitt has been stung an awful lot.
Your Sims alter ego.
So, yeah. So that stuff doesn't really sound like much, I guess, but it permeates the whole game. And so it really does reinvigorate the experience, because the yearly cycle makes it feel so much more like a lived world. And so it's kind of... It feels like one of those expansions that is hugely important because of the fact that it makes The Sims 4 feel deeper and more of a thing that is happening around you and that your characters interact with, rather than a sort of sterile play space that occasionally it can feel like, especially when the franchise is on the early part of whichever iteration's life cycle, you know, before all of the stuff packs and the game packs and the expansion packs occur, so that you can sort of curate a bit more the experience that you want. And it is all a bit of a money pit, but at the same time, like, when it gets to this point about, what are we, 4 years in?
Jesus.
There's a lot to...
I just remember flying to San Francisco for a single day to see The Sims 4 when it was in development.
Yeah, I remember. You were a right state when you came back. And yeah, so that was... What was I talking about? The Sims
Just the fact
4.
that it's very substantial and it's fleshed out the kind of...
Yeah, so I think it's one of those things where, yeah, you do run the risk of it feeling like a complete, you know, just a sandbox, and you are totally, you know, in control of things. And obviously you still are, but, you know, time marches on and it will take you to Christmas, whether you like it or not, and it will take you to, well, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, totally.
And so you can do things like alter the lengths of the seasons, so you can, you know, make it like 7 days, 7 in-game days rather, or 14 or 28, I think, are your options. And so you can kind of, you know, elongate the amount of time between each of these shifts. And there are other little makeshift holidays, or not makeshift holidays, but they're not bound to a specific point in the calendar, so they'll just pop up, you know, like rebate day and you get some money back, or
right,
you know, lottery day or something. But then you've got the regulars, like what do they call it? I think it's Winterfest.
Wintergeddon
is their analogue of Christmas or Chrismukkah or you know, various. And there's also a sort of harvest festival type thing. Love Day is, you know, Valentine's Day kind of thing. So yeah, and each of those, when it's that particular day, there are a set of traditions, so activities that your sim, they don't have to do, but you're encouraged to do them because it will make your sim feel like they've had a good day that day. And some, you know, gain more from you fulfilling that than others. So one of my characters in my family house is super into Christmas, so he got absolutely, you know, into the spirit of things, you know, opening gifts, making a shared grand meal that everybody, you know, partook of, things like that, which was quite sweet. And also I like that stuff specifically because I can get stuck in a bit of a rut with The Sims, especially because 4 always felt like it wasn't quite autonomous.
Right, yeah.
I think you found that as well. Like, it does a lot for you, and your Sims are sort of able to, you know, take care of themselves without much in the way of micromanagement, but also they don't surprise you.
Yeah, that was my issue with it. I think 4's big, and I like The Sims a lot, and 4's big step forward was the tools. Like, architecture tools were way better, the character creation tools were way better than they were in previous games. And those things are very, very important.
Yeah, rooms are just so easy to deal with as you build them.
And then if you're into the architecture stuff or the house design stuff, you got so much more freedom to change like ceiling heights and all that sort of stuff.
I love that stuff.
Yeah, that stuff's really good. It's just never been particularly deep as a simulation. So it's not particularly gratifying if you leave Sims to their own devices because they don't really do anything. I think because it's a little bit of, traditionally it always felt like it was a little bit afraid of upsetting the player with having the world move on without them, which is kind of exactly what I want from The Sims. Like, if I leave just the neighborhood running, I want people to get into relationships and lose their jobs and, you know, all this stuff. And it won't. Like, people will just tick along, basically, until they die. But similarly, if you micromanage everybody and try and control things, then the dramas that emerge don't feel as rewarding because you kind of made them happen. You, like, you bashed your dolls together, basically.
I wonder if that's specifically a problem that we experience more because we tend to be playing this stuff from a journalist perspective, and so, you know, the desire, I guess, or the thing that would work for some interesting features is to let stuff play out. You know, you put the variables in, you put, for example, the PC Gamer team into a house, and then you just let it play out, and it surprises you by having, I don't know, people fall out over biscuits, or, you know, so-and-so is over here doing this thing, and it, you know, that would actually, you know, make work a lot easier because you could just trust the simulation to do those things, whereas you have to actually choose them, and that changes the parameters of, I guess, an easy, entertaining feature. And that's not to say that's, you know, that's why it annoyed you, but
I don't think it's journalistic for me because I played The Sims for Sims 4 for probably about 12 hours when I was reviewing it, and I've played like 100 hours of that game now. So, like, you know, they clearly kept playing it, but, like, you know, it has, so my preferred way of approaching it is always to, switch off autonomy for the controlled sim, but leave it on for everybody else. So that you're just one person in the world. And that's why I've maybe noticed these things. I think I've always just wanted it to have more depth and more options. Like, I'd like, you know, I don't see the harm in, apart from the complexity of its technical implementation, of saying, I'm happy for you to turn Sims autonomy and the potential consequences of that up to absolute max. Just let me kind of be a single character in this little world.
My pet seems to have autonomy. Like, he kept running away. Mr. Wiggles just kept running away. And
what kind of animal is Mr. Wiggles?
Mr. Wiggles was a cat. Mr. Wiggles died while I was in the bath on New Year's Eve. The Grim Reaper turns up for cats. I spent New Year's Eve watching the countdown on my television with the Grim Reaper. We clinked glasses at midnight. So Loretta actually had a really good New Year's Eve.
Her life's amazing.
I love Loretta. I want to be her when I grow up.
You might be.
But yeah, anyway, but that's part of what I was getting at with this is that, so I can sometimes get stuck in a bit of, not exactly a rut, but I can sometimes, if I don't have a particular rule set in mind, or if I'm not working on a particular project, then that game can kind of flounder a bit, or I'm really spinning my wheels and I drift away for months and months. And so one of the things that I quite like about this is that when one of these events comes around and it essentially says you need to fulfill these challenges so your sim has a nice day, it makes me finally answer the phone to one of the people who keeps phoning me and hang out with them, because the day will often demand it, or it will be my chance to, I don't know, install a particular thing, or buy a particular decoration for the house, or it does have the capacity to break you out of ruts a little bit with those structures, which is quite nice. Because the other thing is I can kind of end up with a really ad hoc house as I try and pursue particular small goals, and then sort of don't really think about, if I actually lived here, what would I want it to look like? And so when a holiday comes around, and one of the things that you can do is you can decorate it using, a little, so there's storage boxes which you activate in your house to decorate the outside of the house. But also you can rummage in it for little themed decorations when a holiday rolls around, or you can just flat out buy stuff from the build mode options, and place those around the house. And that was quite nice, because I found myself thinking, if I lived here, I would put tinsel, I would put lights here, I would put cards here, I would do this and that and the other. The only problem with that is that you can't easily take all of that stuff down afterwards.
Right, yeah.
The auto decorate stuff that comes from the storage box can be put back in. You can undecorate, basically. But the individual items, the cards, the festive swags, the tinsel, the Christmas trees, you have to put all of them, as far as I can tell, into storage individually.
So I'm not going to necessarily try and draw too much of a parallel here, but we're currently sat in the living room, which currently still has Christmas lights.
I don't need to talk to you about this.
Around the ceiling.
I don't need to explain my choices at all.
Okay.
Certainly don't need to explain the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sets of Christmas lights that are still decorating the room.
And it is the 11th of July.
Well, there's no point. It's almost back around.
Indeed. But what I'm saying is that perhaps the issue here is not the Sims 4 Seasons feature set, but a broader desire for it to be Christmas every day.
You know that I listen to Christmas music all year round.
I do.
I did you a courtesy by taking down the miniature Christmas tree last month, though.
I'm still grateful. I think the lights are nice. Anyway, let's move on. I've always found that The Sims is interesting because
I can't move on. It's Christmas all the time, Chris.
It's like Groundhog Day, but if Groundhog Day was set on Christmas instead of
Christmas is delightful.
Groundhog Day. It is.
Where's my festive ham? You there? What
again.
Day is this? It's Christmas Day, sir. Or whatever.
Buy me a ham, as that story famously goes.
No,
bring me your hams.
And bring me the biggest, I don't know, goose and deliver it to Bob Cratchit's house.
Yeah.
And then they all sing
and then
the
get
songs.
me a ham. I'm not going.
It's the season to be jolly and joyous.
This is the answer to this is obviously yes, but is that story inseparable from the Muppets in your head? Yeah, it is for me as well.
Charles Dickens is well boring.
It is, yeah. And you're named after a character from a Dickens novel.
Therefore, I'm allowed to have this opinion.
What I was going to say about The Sims was, one thing that always just frustrated me, I guess the game I kind of want The Sims to be a lot, and the one I sort of go back to it for ages to try and find, is the game that actually sort of gets in deep about stuff. And I always find myself compelled by it in the kind of collecty, sort of very easy to pass time with kind of way. But then ultimately pushed away by certain parts of its emptiness. Like, I think we've talked about on the podcast before, maybe even when The Sims 4 came out, about its apoliticalness, the fact that everybody is sort of middle class, the sort of the absence of meaningful hardship really for a lot of people, other than like comedy hardship. But also time is super weird in The Sims traditionally. Like, by default, like, a lifespan of a human being might be basically like 2 weeks of in-game time. Like there's, because it goes to it bothers to, it's a really interesting simulation in some ways, because you can do abstract timescales and that's fine. But The Sims actually tracks every minute of every hour of every day in the Sims' lives. And certain actions are scaled against real time in a way, like, sort of. So like you go to work for 7 hours, but anything shorter than that, any task shorter than an 8-hour day of work takes far longer than it does in real life. So you get in the shower in the morning and you're in the shower for an hour and a half. And then you get out of the shower and you make an omelette, and making an omelette takes you 2 hours. And then you take the bins out and that's half an hour, even though you're just walking out the house, because of the speed at which time progresses. And then, you suddenly, then you're under the vast compression in the other direction where like you have a baby. The next day the baby's a toddler. A week later the baby's a teenager.
I can't remember if this is just because I've turned off aging in various ways, but you age up in The Sims 4 by blowing out candles on a birthday cake. Like that's an auto age up like thing. So I'm really wary of celebrating Loretta's birthday because I've switched off aging for her. But if I do that, it'll take that as my deliberate aging up of her. And so I've already accidentally made her an elder, which is a problem because it means that roller skating is quite painful or risky. It's risky.
Yeah.
And woohooing with the ghost of her dead wife is also risky.
Not like wooing.
Yeah, that house is haunted.
Right.
It's haunted as hell.
Right. That's a Patrick Swayze-ass ghost situation you've got there.
It's because I drowned her wife in the pool that was in our bedroom.
Why?
Because it was, so I had got her wife because
got a wife.
Essentially I flagged Katrina down as she walked past and found out that she had like a family oriented trait. And
That'll do, you thought?
Well, yeah, because it was for a feature where I was trying to raise a baby. It was to obtain and raise a child successfully to adulthood. And so I needed a carer for that child that I didn't have to pay for. And so Katrina had to be that. But then once the child had left home, and I did try marrying her at that point because I realised we'd been engaged for the whole duration of the child's life and hadn't really made any progress on that.
That's what I'm saying, but timescales.
So we got engaged. No, we got married finally. And then I just sort of... It didn't really help. It didn't change anything. I still found her a bit annoying. I think she kept kicking the treehouse down outside because she was really frustrated because she wasn't allowed to do anything but look after a child for 18 years. So I thought I'd take the traditional way out and drown her in the swimming pool.
Jesus Christ.
But the only swimming pool was in the bedroom.
Why?
And also then the Sims can get out of swimming pools. Did you know that? If you remove the ladder, they can get out like normal
revolving.
People. They're just like, oh, well, I'll just heave myself out like a human would do. So I had to not only put her back in and then remove, basically make sure the ladder wasn't there, etc., but also had to then plant a series of shrubs along the side so she couldn't get out. And so that also Loretta couldn't see her. But then, so she died and her ghost just sort of hangs around. So I have been experimenting with the extent to which that is a thing that Loretta can interact with. Turns out, lots of, pumpy.
You got way beyond pottery.
And also, I think my ghost cat is ill, but I can't, like, look after it. Because it was just like, you know, you have the option to click on the cat and sort of, you know, one of the things on the wheel of options is what's wrong. And that way you can find out if it needs to be taken to the vet or whatever. And it was like, oh, you know, Mr. Wiggles needs feeding. And it's like, no, Mr. Wiggles doesn't need feeding. Mr. Wiggles doesn't have a corporeal tummy anymore. So, I mean, like, I feel like there's something going wrong there. Like, because there was no option for ghost kibble. It really is just, I can put food down for him or not, but I sold his food bowl because he was dead.
Yeah, as you would.
So, although I did forget to move his ashes for a very long time.
Where were they?
Just in the hall. I just stepped round them every day. I just forgot. Because they were where a half wall was just obscuring it from the viewpoint
That's
that
completely
I usually...
understandable.
Yeah, where I usually look from. The best thing, though, about holidays is that you can make your own
Oh, cool.
in the game. And so I made the Day of Grudges.
Of course you did.
And so what it does is it lets you name the day. It lets you assign traditions to that day, like up to 5 from the list that they have preset. And there's quite a lot of things, you know, there's like, I think like water fights or, you know, that kind of thing. So the Day of Grudges, let's see if I can remember this, because I did assign 5 because I wanted to make sure that, you know, there was a lot to do. And one of them, the most logical, was air grievances. So that's definitely in there. And then there was drinking, because I thought, well, yes. Remembrance is one of them, which is how I discovered that the urn was still there, because I could then mourn my cat.
It. Right.
Well, no, I could mourn the cat there, you see, without having to go outside, because outside is where the gravestone of my wife is. Anyway, and what were the other 2? Fighting. Which technically Loretta doesn't have to do because she's an elder. So some of the activities, like if you're a toddler, if you're an elder, you know, that kind of thing, you are exempt from some of them that just don't make sense, which is quite, you know, it's...
Forward thinking.
Well, it's smart, because otherwise you'd have just massively inappropriate stuff, I guess. And I think the last one is just telling stories, because I thought that maybe you could
about
regale
awful shit people have done.
Exactly. So there's an amazing screenshot, which I absolutely love, which is just Loretta standing in the front garden, like clutching a cocktail that she's mixed and telling a child that his life choices are terrible, and then she shoves him. It was so good.
Oh, happy Grudge Day, everybody.
I know. And then even though she didn't have to, I made her get into a fight with a student. I was like, you there, young man, come here.
Like most people's OCs, there's a lot of you in Loretta, I think.
It's a lot of wish fulfillment, I tell you that.
Bless.
So yeah, and then, you know, there's the usual, you can woohoo with Father Christmas, and you can...
you know, Christmas stuff.
The Sims stuff,
You fuck Santa, and that's that,
you know. And then there's the whole, you know, the crops side of things, so, you know...
Just banging on crops.
Well, you know, so the harvestable plants are now bound to particular seasons. So, you know, it's essentially that you look after your garden and spring rolls around and suddenly a bunch of things burst into flower and other things die off. You know, it's quite, you know, it's quite involved. And I assume that's why it made sense to flesh out the gardening career paths at this point. So... Loretta is like really good at flower arranging.
I imagine you would be after that life.
Well, it's because she had a lot of bluebells about her person. So, you know, I thought waste not, want not, and got involved with the flower arranging racket. And the bees just hang out, you know. I can dust them for mites and stuff, and I can also try and befriend them. But then also sometimes if I'm just like standing nearby, a little, you know, in your task queue, stung will appear. And so like I try and get rid of it each time, but obviously sometimes you don't, and Loretta just gets stung. And that's all my Sims 4 news.
Good.
Oh, also, Shu accidentally went on holiday. Did I tell you about this?
She went on holiday by mistake.
Well, no, she said that she needed a holiday, so I stupidly took her on one instead of, making her work harder. Making her stop complaining to me about it, because shut up. But it meant going to this tropical kind of retreat place, and she was at the kind of plaza, I guess, the main sort of square where there were all of these stalls. There were some food stalls, and in one of them, I noticed that it had got to, I think it was, it must have been closing time because the flaps of it came down. And I couldn't see where she was, so I clicked to center it, and it just had her little plumb bob poking out of the top of this thing, and it was red because I think I hadn't, fed her or watered her, or she wasn't clean for, for a while. And so I was seeing this red plumb bob sticking out of the top of this, stall, and then suddenly it turned green, and I was like, what's going on in there? And I wondered whether she'd shacked up with someone, or whether there was some rumpy bumpy going on and she was having a great time. And then, about an hour or so later, the sides went up, and then she's just standing there holding a burger, having a great time. She just looks like the happiest person. I was like, I really like you.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
That reminds me, actually, in terms of best lives. So, did you see that? Because this is almost news if I think about it. Did you see that Minecraft's been updated with undersea biome stuff and dolphins? And
I didn't see that it had finally dropped, but I've been keeping a vague eye on that.
So that's
stuff.
what I want to ask: is that because that version of Minecraft, the one that's now been updated with the update, is exclusive to Windows 10? Where, which of these two poles is more, repellent or appealing? Would this, the availability of blocky dolphins, make you confront your most hated enemy, Microsoft Windows 10?
I think that I can't log into Minecraft. Because
not after the last time.
No, as in genuinely, I think that there's a problem with my account because I can't remember the login details, but I didn't buy that account. It was a gift from a friend long enough ago that it wasn't any of their current systems.
Right.
And so if you want to reset your account and you can't find your details in that respect, you have to, I believe you have to get in touch with them with the email, the proof of purchase and stuff, but I don't have it because I didn't purchase it.
Fine.
So it was it's a gift, and thus I actually genuinely don't think I have access to Microsoft, to Minecraft anymore.
Well, in that case, would this get you to buy it?
But I was genuinely interested in seeing how the undersea stuff worked, because the actual things like the corals and stuff actually looked interesting. It looked like an environment that I wanted to have a poke around, at least, even if not, ultimately spend much time in, because I do find Minecraft beautiful. I just, I don't find much to do after a while. I have a long old wander. I see whatever it has generated for me in that particular seed or whatever. And then I don't want to spend time building anything. It's not a building tool set that I particularly find
this exploration game kind of thing
rewarding. Yeah. And so I think I would probably, have a dive, have an explore, and then, after a couple of hours of taking screenshots or having a poke around, I'd probably be done.
That sounds reasonable.
So it's probably not worth the money. But I mean, to be fair, the last time that I spent any significant amount of time in Minecraft, it was on a friend's shared server, and I invited you over and you blew up my house.
I wondered how long it was going to be until that got mentioned.
It was a really good house. I made an actual light up disco dance floor. I really did. There was so much effort that went into that. And you came in and you were like, I've brought my friend, the creeper.
It followed me.
Boom.
And then that happened. And then I never logged into that server again.
Neither did I.
Well, a very happy Wintermas to you.
Floor. I did loads of redstone, like, circuitry to make the disco floor work.
I am sorry. Or what can I say? For
You weren't sorry at the time. You wouldn't apologise. I couldn't get an apology out of you for days. I remember this. It's the Day of Grudges.
Indeed. Every
Thank
day.
goodness.
This is the issue. Every day is Christmas. Every day is also the Day of Grudges. Of the other games you've played, what stands out as things people should check out?
I'm trying to think. The others weren't... I wasn't bowled over by the others, although Ashi has a kind of... there's an appealing quality to it in that it's like a spatial puzzler that I found quite straightforward, like very easy. But when you completed a sufficiently complicated level in terms of how the movement unfolds, you are guiding a firefly around a little obstacle course on the surface of the water using lanterns to guide it and to bend it round corners and things. And so I liked the idea behind it, and several of the levels were actually really pleasing just to watch them play out, almost like in a kind of mousetrap-esque way.
Rube Goldberg machine kind of thing.
Yeah, like not as complicated, but there was a pleasure to watching that unfold. So, and given I think it's only like £2 or £3, so I think
what's the full name again?
It's called Ashi Lake of Light. And so I thought that was quite a sweet one to kind of give a mention, and it might be a nice one for people to maybe play with their kids if their kids are into little puzzle games, just because, and I don't want to suggest that kids, like massively easy things.
Kids like Fortnite.
Fortnite involves too many fingers. You need at least 4 hands. But I think it might be the sort of thing that you could play with a slightly younger kid, or if spatial puzzle stuff, like 2D spatial puzzles, aren't your natural wheelhouse, I think the difficulty curve is gentle enough that it might be easy. Not easy. It might be approachable.
Accessible. Yeah.
Yeah, because I appreciate that I'm the sort of person that is still gradually chipping away at Stephen's Sausage Roll, a game that actively hates you. And that is really not for everybody. So I think it's very much at the opposite end of the puzzle spectrum, and I think that there is value to that.
Yeah,
so.
I do too. I think these experiences can and should be available at different levels of engagement.
Also, Dr. Frank's Build-A-Boyfriend is fun.
That's a good name for a game.
I like that.
What do you do in it?
So,
is it like the Build-A-Bear workshop?
I've mentioned it a couple of times, I think, in the current piece, or the issue of PC Gamer that we've sent to print. But basically what it is a visual novel crossed with a point and click. So it's kind of, I think it was made for a game jam, and you play as Dr. Frank, which is a riff on the Frankenstein story. And you have been dumped. And you decide that the best way to get back at your ex-boyfriend is to build a new boyfriend and take that incredibly fit new boyfriend along to the academic conference that you are both attending and basically be so over it and under someone else that it is spectacular. It's basically a dating revenge fantasy / just quite funny. Quite sweet visual novel / point and click. I really liked its sense of humour. It's not safe for work, but not in the sense that I think that sounds like. It's more in the sense of, you have to acquire body parts for this Frankenstein's monster that you're building, and one of those body parts is a penis, basically.
Yeah.
So, but it's not in the sense of, erotica. It's just,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's as erotic as finding a spare dick.
I just found it really funny. And the dialogue is actually genuinely, I found it really entertaining,
cool.
and I have been.
Where is that
mentioning
available?
quite
Is it
a
on
lot.
Steam? Is it?
Yeah, it's on Steam, free of charge. I think it's probably on Itch.io as well. So, yeah, just have a little
Cool.
look. And Cognizer is a puzzle game that is about tiles, and it's this super simple thing that is obviously for mobile primarily, but it's, you get a grid of tiles, they are different colours and they have different symbols on them, and then you have a smiley face and a happy face, and if a colour is listed next to the happy face, then you are supposed to click on that thing, and if it is next to the sad face, you are not allowed to click on it, otherwise you lose a life. And so
I see, yeah.
you'll have things like happy face being blue and triangle, and you'll have sad face being pink and diamond. And so if something is blue, then you'll, click all of them, unless there's a diamond on there, in which case it's not safe anymore. And then, you'll also go around and click all of the, whatever it was that I said was on the happy face, those symbols, except if they're pink, because that was a sad face thing. And it's one of those things that sounds so simple once you start doing it, and you're like, I've got all the time in the world, 45 seconds, that's loads. And then suddenly, about 6 levels in, it's, there's 3 symbols listed next to the thing. You can't remember which colour is which. You aren't sure which shapes are anymore. And you've got 15 seconds. And you're kind of like,
That's cool, actually.
So it's, it's a very basic thing, but it's surprisingly difficult. And I believe it's free.
Cool. Is that also a Steam thing?
Yeah, I found both of those on Steam, actually. I think it just threw them up as free downloads in whatever my Steam storefront tries to do nowadays, because it can't cope with. Do you remember when I was playing BioShock, and I think it was so ecstatic that I'd finally played a mainstream game that it just said, "Oh my goodness, do you want to play Doom? Do you want to play Wolfenstein? Could you be possibly interested in Team Fortress?" I was just kind of like, nah, you're all right, thanks. I'm going to wait another, 14 years. But yeah, so that's my life this last couple of weeks.
Cool. Let's do some questions, why not?
How weird. How unexpected.
Let's do some questions. Our first question comes from Jeff, and it is entitled Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff with a J or a G?
J, both J's. Both Jeffs identical in all but bit, one of them being Jeff Goldblum. He writes, "Your developers were so preoccupied with whether or not they could get Jeff Goldblum, they didn't stop to think if they should get Jeff Goldblum," which is a reference to my issues with Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park
Did
Evolution.
you talk through them?
I did, at some length. He follows up with the question. Also a question, as reviewers, you probably often find yourself critiquing game design decisions, but have you ever had strong opinions on a business decision a studio has made? That's Jeff from Nova Scotia. I thought we'd read this out because I suspect that you have some strong opinions about business decisions that developers have made.
Well, I think everyone who regularly plays games has opinions about some of the business decisions, just because the price points will often impact them. And so things like microtransactions are very much a player concern, and, so on and so forth. And I think in terms of business decisions that I come back to a lot, I would say it's one of those things, because obviously you almost always don't know who is making the decision. So you sort of, or, the exact processes by which something came about. So I try not to veer into, assuming that I know exactly why something has come about. But the ones that feel problematic from my perspective as a player are things like, I get really annoyed about the international. I get really annoyed about the battle pass.
Yeah.
in recent years, not when it first started, because it felt like it was kind of an unknown quantity and Valve were taken by surprise by how popular it was. But I think certainly things like this year, when, as part of the rubric about how it was all going to work, Valve kind of position, and if the community gets the prize pool to, I think it was like, what, $30 million?
Everyone gets extra treats.
Essentially, yeah, everyone gets extra digital cosmetics, which will obviously, there'll be a development cost attached to it, but they're not, that you assign to people's accounts, right? And it was such a kind of, it'll be a nice thing, and 30 million for the player account, for the prize pool, and you get treats. And it was so averse to the, it positioned it as such a kind of community thing and a rewards for players thing. And essentially, Valve get the other 75% of the investment. So, Valve put in, what is it, $1.6 million to the prize pool.
Yeah, and they're saying if you
and the rest of it is, the rest of it is 25% of the investment that players have made in the Battle Pass overall. And so to boost the prize pool by
saying give Valve $90 million, basically.
Well, yeah, it's slightly less because of the 1.6 investment. But essentially it was saying, we'll give you some hats if you give us
$88.4 million. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, no, it's not quite. Anyway, but yeah, it's basically between 80 and $90 million Valve will get, and you get some hats. And it just felt so disingenuous the way it was framed. And I find more and more with that Battle Pass, I just feel so gouged by it, and so kind of, it feels so grindy. You can't really level up, and
well, that's the interesting thing.
Can you?
That's gotten better every year.
Oh, has it?
Yeah. So
because I think maybe I tapped out when I got really angry with the first.
Yeah. So that's the weird thing, is like it's gotten more grasping in terms of, well, that specific thing of offering this extra bonus if the prize pool gets to a certain amount. The rate of growth year on year has slowed. But this year is the most fun it has ever been to simply level it up without paying. Like, I mean, this is the first year I haven't, because they usually sell two. They usually sell like the £7 start at level 1 pack and the £25 start at level 75 pack. And previous years I always just got the level 75 one because it's like, it's a free game that I've spent thousands of hours playing. I'll pay £25 a year for this thing, for hats, basically. And this year I just went for the £7 one, and I've leveled it up to something like 50 odd just by playing the Battle Royale mode they added and all of this stuff. The fact that bonus mode, most of them come with like a bonus mode and some challenges and quests and stuff. All of that stuff is markedly better this year than it has been previously. But I agree with you on the other side. Like, I think the thing gets better, but the principle is still, there are flaws with it. So.
I think that's fair. I think the thing is that I've become progressively less involved with Dota because I started to fall away from it naturally, I think, because I was, working with it less and playing it less, and the group that I had to play with, moved on to other things. And so it slipped out of my general rotation, and the Battle Pass it does nothing to make me want to go back. Yeah. And so the sense that I had was, and so I do look each year and I do check in, and some of the things look quite fun, but the parts of it that I would want or that I would like are usually too far up the ladder of levels than one could get with a full-time job if one started at the bottom. And also I think it also fits within a larger sort of, not grievance, but a larger sort of discomfort with how Valve often frame their requests of the community. You know, essentially, to me, it often feels like they're farming out work to the community, and the benefit is disproportionately in Valve's favour.
Yeah.
And I know that that's an oversimplified way of looking at it, and that different people will get different things out of, you know, that exposure, and it very much depends on the project. But so I am only talking in very general terms, but that has been my overriding impression of the company for a while on that front, is that I'm not comfy with some of the...
Yeah, it's interesting because like it feels like battle passes, which is a system that Dota more or less invented, this idea of a seasonal pass in order to earn fixed rewards from mini games and quests and those kinds of things, is becoming the new loot boxes. Like, there was actually a good
season passes and things.
Yeah.
As well.
But season passes were something else, like battle passes as a specific concept, where you have a calendar of rewards that you get for getting specific things, rather than a kind of content release schedule. The content is all delivered up front with the battle pass. It's just that you join in with other players over a period of time to get access to it. There was a good article on PC Gamer recently about how Fortnite uses this model taken from Dota, and this may well be as legislation begins to crack down on loot boxes in different ways and in different territories. There's the whisper on the wind is that this is the system that will replace loot boxes.
I think as well, consumers generally seem to feel more comfy with it. You know, that you don't feel as gouged or as vulnerable.
The crucial thing is you know what the rewards are. So you know that, like, okay, I want this particular thing. It arrives at level 100.
Yeah.
Whether or not, whatever the thing you have to do in terms of time or money to get to level 100 is, that is a lot more transparent than a loot box with a random number generator attached.
I mean, I enjoy it in other forms. I mean, Animal Crossing has been rolling, you know, Pocket Camp, has been, basically since the first fishing event, it got really good at this cadence of always having something to do, you know, every few days after, I don't know, one event closes, another one seems to start, and it, you know, seems to alternate between the fishing ones and the plant-based ones. But essentially you plant a bunch of seeds, and when they flower, you get a bunch of insects that are attracted to those flowers, and then there's a percentage chance when you catch those insects, you know, or that you will catch them, and then you as you collect more of them, you earn certain rewards. Yeah. There's like in-game fiction around, you know, why you're doing it, but and so that feels knowable to me, because I can figure out where I'm happy to spend my time or my resources, or, you know, that kind of thing. So I'm not saying that it's a bad model per se, or that I don't enjoy it in some forms. I just find the phrasing is very important as to whether I'm okay with. Yeah,
that's what I find interesting, because
happening.
If we take Fortnite's implementation, for example, that's like, I get what you're saying, like the weaknesses of Valve's so Fortnite implements that stuff, but without any of the crowd-funded element, and without any of the community-made content element. And I definitely get what you're saying, that like, so that is in a far more kind of, you know, well understood commercial bounds. You buy this, you get the hats. It feels like the problems that you have with Valve's implementation of it with Dota is that it taps into this other stuff about, you know, community creators getting paid for stuff, and also esports getting funded by it, which is, I get it, because I think there is a sort of, I think Valve do underplay how much of a profit driver, how much money it makes for them. You know, the notion that it is this pure community effort is disingenuous. However, the Fortnite implementation gives no money to anybody, other than Epic. The Dota one legitimately does. But it's almost like in that attempt, they put themselves in territory that they then have to be more careful in than they are. I don't know. Like,
I think there's a couple of things, and I hope that I phrased them write because it's quite a thorny subject, and I would usually try and sort of, take a few drafts of this if I were writing it down. But I think that specifically with the situation with the International, with the community funding element of it, I think there's a risk that, that if you hide behind that too much, it means that you are essentially using people's goodwill to drive the profit to your company, right? And this isn't to draw a parallel, but to just sort of illustrate the point. It's kind of like saying 10% of this sale will go to a charity. There's an element of that that's a bit like, are you then profiteering off someone's goodwill towards a different thing? I don't think that's quite fair either, but because obviously there's a kind of
business cost.
There's also just a bunch of other factors that play into that kind of stuff or that kind of giving. So I don't want to say that they're comparable exactly, but it illustrates hopefully a bit of that basic point. And so when you say, oh, if you chip into this, you're essentially like supporting these people's dreams, it's kind of, I find that quite icky, because it's like, it's like, that's not the whole story. And you are profiting off people buying into that specific narrative quite hard. And so that's why that makes me, it gives me pause for thought, because it's very deliberately only putting forward the one part of the story. Yeah. And they're not hiding it, but they're just not, mentioning it in the same breath, and it skews how that feels to me.
It is funny, isn't it? Because the other things that use this system with no money, with 100% of the money going to the developer, don't mention money at all. They don't mention it. And, it's almost like the fact that you're being told 25% of this is going to something you care about is more disquieting than we are 100% making money from this.
I think it introduces a question about, about motives and about whether people are legitimately trying to help a thing or whether they're just trying to benefit from it, or whether, and again, I'm not lobbying these accusations at specific companies, but I'm saying that it provokes a very different way of thinking about them for me, that I want to interrogate more, because if something is just, do you want to give this person your money? Yeah. Then that's, there might be some that are a bit more.
There's a lot of stuff that's in this territory. Like, I think, like, there's like, I don't necessarily agree about Valve stuff particularly, but like, I agree that in general, there's a danger area around sort of, fund this out of principle. Like, fund this because you feel like you should, or because, we're all in this, like the kind of like fostering a sense of an in crowd that remains an in crowd because they pay. That I think that's an enormously like, common loop now. Like that spans things like Twitch subscriptions, for particular channels, to, all sorts of things, right? Like it's a very modern business model, is just to sort of allow people to buy their way in, to a sense of identity or something like that's, that I think I always, it gives me pause, I think, like, cause I worry about how that fits into people's lives and what it actually means to support something. And I say this as somebody who runs the Patreon for this podcast, for example, but there's a reason that I've never wanted us to offer anything in return for Patreon backing. You don't get a special Discord channel or special access to us or special episodes or anything, because I wanted to make it really clear that and obviously enormously grateful to everybody who backs us on Patreon, because it's like you just allow this to happen. And
yeah, we couldn't do it without it.
We couldn't do it without it. And it's enormously, important to this being able to happen, but I didn't want people to feel like they had to in order to get access to be a quote unquote a real, listener or anything like that. Like that doesn't feel right to me. So I'm happy with this middle ground where it's like, if people want to, it's enormously appreciated, but it is also optional.
It's interesting watching people try to navigate that, because different solutions fit different types of community as well.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I would say that complicates the Dota thing slightly is that I have argued for a long time that specific prize pool is actually not healthy for the scene. And so, it's like, it's also by choosing not to participate, it's about, not supporting that sort of weird injection of cash into a scene that sort of destabilizes it so massively, even with the advent of the majors and minors kind of cadence of of the competitive season. So there's another business model, but shall we move on?
Yeah, I think that's probably enough on esports funding.
It wasn't esports, it's The Sims.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But that tends to be that I get to this point and everything's fine, because I tend to own the bits that make it the game that I want to play, whether that's through work or whether that's through, my own purchases. But often when one of those cycles starts up, I remember with Sims 3, I'd come to it from The Sims 4 and I was suddenly like, oh, it's an empty game and I'm going to have to re-buy everything. And I just felt so kind of sad.
The Sims is an interesting one. Like I remember talking to Maxis about this, and the only justification of it is that for a lot of people, Sims is the only game they play. And so this is like someone's, what anyone with a broader gaming habit would spend on games in a year, some people spend on Sims expansions. But. So
I get that. And I think that for the hardcore players that works, but for people like me who want to be able to dip in and out more, if this wasn't my job, I'm not sure I could justify it. And that's why I've sort of been trying to, almost like as a thought experiment, work out what form of subscription model might work for it. Because I was kind of, I would happily pay like, a couple of quid a month for a few, a few quid a month for a few months to sink back into it, and have all of the stuff available, but not have to, make an investment of, dozens of.
Well, I was thinking about that because I was like, oh, maybe I want to play The Sims again, because I get that every couple of months. And then I was like, oh no, that's a series of big.
So that's an interesting one. But anyway.
Let's leave money behind for a moment and let's talk about crunchy things. Kingsley writes, Dear Crunch and Fracture, I've been playing a lot of Prey Moon Crash, which is a brilliant game with one really off-putting feature. The crunchy snapping noise of walking with the broken bones debuff is unpleasantly evocative and really turns my stomach every time I hear it. I'm sure that's the intended effect, but I can't remember ever feeling anything this strongly due to an audio clue. Are there any other sounds in games that elicit such strong emotions? Love the pod. Kingsley.
I hate whispering.
You hate whispering generally, yeah. So that's the thing.
Yeah, it makes me... It's like nails down a blackboard for me, whispering. Just... There used to be an advert that was on UK TV, loads, and it was for Skittles, and it just had a child whispering "Taste the rainbow" at the end, and it made me feel physically sick. Like I cannot.
Did you play
deal with
Hellblade?
No.
Don't play Hellblade, because that's the game with the binaural surround sound. Whispering.
Yeah.
It's so good as well. And it would give you the intended effect, like it is supposed to be unsettling. I'm trying to think about specific, I totally get what Kingsley's saying about the broken bones thing in Prey, because it is grim. I think generally I don't have this relationship with sounds. I get it with certain animations. Are
there any particular ones that spring to mind? Is it the holes thing that bothers you?
Oh God, trypophobia.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have my equivalent to this is anything with an element of that.
Yeah.
You
used to get funny about Destiny on that front, didn't you?
Yeah, there's the Hive stuff in Destiny used to weird me out a bit. Both BioShock games have some element of this. It's the bee powers where the insects hatch from your arms, that kind of thing.
BioShock gets me as well, but it's the injections because I can't deal with injections.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the sound specifically. But no, like, I think I'm quite visual with this, with things that make me really uncomfortable. Like, not specific sound effects anyway, because I'm thinking like, oh, well, you know, Alien Isolation uses sound really, really well.
I've tensed my shoulder as if someone's about to whisper in my ear.
I feel cold in
just
my hands now because
I
was just thinking about arms breaking into like barnacle-sized wounds because of the BioShock B arm power. So thanks for that, Kingsley. Appreciate that. Yeah. I get that way about anything that do you ever have any of those things that you hate enough and make you so uncomfortable that you have to Google them? This is the essence of horror for me.
No, I don't think so, but I know what I know what you're getting at because I know that a lot of people do that, or they'll have, you know, certain things that images that freak them out, but they'll look at for a good 2 seconds before, you know, slamming the book shut and never opening it again until the next time, or, you know, that kind of thing. I used to have images in a book about, like, terrible things that happened, you know, things like, spontaneous combustion and things, which were really disquieting, but to me, it wasn't a sort of horrified fascination, so I'd look at them. It was, I used to keep those pages clamped shut and, like, cover the images while I was reading the text and stuff, and put heavy things on top of the books so that the images couldn't get out in the night, things like that when I was really little. And I think it's kind of persisted to this day because, you know, we didn't go down the far end of the PS4 menu because that was where PT lived.
Yeah. So. The neck snap sound in PT is a very good bit of horror sound design. Again,
I did not get that far, I believe.
You did, but you were hiding behind.
Oh, I was probably trying not to be sick, wasn't I? Good.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a really interesting thought, like, if any.
Knuckles popping really bothers me. Really bothers me.
But that's not going to occur in games very often, is it, I suppose?
Occasionally people will do that thing where they flex their fingers before they, you know, pick up a weapon and stuff like that. But it's not a repeated sound.
I have a bad habit of getting phrases stuck in my head, or like particular wordings of phrases, or like deliveries of phrases. And like often I won't even remember, after a certain amount of time, I won't even remember the original words. It just becomes this kind of annoying, recurring, like I guess you can't talk about voices having a melody, but like a kind of sort of cadence or like a pattern. It's not the same as hating it in the moment, but like I played Baldur's Gate when I was a kid, and the guy in the Candlekeep Inn at the start who says, "My hotel's as clean as an elven arse," was just stuck in my head for possibly like the rest of my life. Like, when I met my sort of like teenage best friend, he had also played Baldur's Gate, and that just resurfaced, and now I associate with him, and that phrase will never ever leave my head, and that particular delivery of it, which I didn't just do very well, but anyone who's played Baldur's Gate will know exactly what I mean. And that particular delivery is like, there's some part of my fucking RAM that is forever occupied by that phrase.
So while I was working at RPS, my beloved former colleague, Alice O'Connor, went through a phase of talking to me exclusively in the cadence of Fred from the B-52s. And one of the things that she actually recorded and sent to me just as a throwaway joke got stuck in my head, and had been there for several days. And this is really recently. So I asked her to actually just send it to me again, because I thought, do you know what? You know, it's that thing of you've got an earworm. So you think, oh, I'll listen to it. And it'll hopefully dislodge it. And not only did that not work, I then decided at 1 a.m., because it's so hot and I wasn't sleeping properly and I'm on deadline and it's been deadline for 1,000,000 years and I was slightly delirious, that I would set it as my alarm ringtone.
God.
And I forgot about that until this morning at
amazing.
8 a.m. when I was awoken by the dulcet tones of Alice O'Connor doing an impression of Fred from the B-52s in the most echoey room in Scotland.
Those high-ceilinged Edinburgh rooms.
So yeah, that's certainly a thing that has happened off the back of my involvement in gaming.
Good. Our next question comes from Alex, who writes, what enforceable change would you make to lower toxicity in online team games?
Oh, goodness.
So there are a lot of serious answers to this, and we could possibly get into them. This is probably bouncing off Overwatch's recent and arguably successful changes. I would, and maybe I've said this before, but it frustrates me. I would remove... You can have damaged
People's
characters.
hands. No more typing for you.
I would place a moratorium on, like, traditionally cool characters. By traditionally cool, I mean laziest derivations from 80s cartoons and 90s comic books. So I'm talking about your Genjis. I'm talking about your
Widowmaker?
No, she's weird. Like, Widowmaker's fine, because, like...
but she's a sniper, and therefore people will flock because people love to showboat.
But that's fine. It's fine, because the character, like, you can be more original with it. But, like, I'm talking about in, like, Lawbreakers, interesting cast of characters until you get to the dual knives, dual pistol men. And there are always the dual knife, dual pistol men. Basically,
Soldier 76 in Overwatch then.
Yeah, he's an old man. There's a slightly different thing.
Okay.
I'm talking about the cool young man characters, I think. I'm talking about, like, any time where we've designed a DPS character, therefore it has to look like this. Basically what I'm saying is, down with rogues. In principle. Because if you want to be tough on rogues and tough on the causes of rogues.
I was wondering. Yeah.
And that means basically giving people who will instantly flock to what they perceive to be the coolest character in the room nowhere to go, and therefore hopefully they'll channel that initial sense of lostness into more productive things. By all means, have DPS characters, but make them look different.
I was going to say, I relatedly and sort of building on that, I would say keep Genji in the game, give him clown shoes.
Big squeaky shoes.
Yeah. Like...
yeah, I see. There's a lot of, I'm real fond of those sorts of balance changes. Like, keep Genji in the game, but give him Goofy's voice.
What does Goofy sound like?
Like, it's the sort of the all shucksy kind of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or Deputy Dog.
Yeah, exactly.
Or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I think by making something, because this is the issue I have, is often those are the roles and this is not 100% linked to toxicity, but it is linked to, brinksmanship, which is often brinksmanship is often the death of online team games because, one of the things I like about PUBG and its ilk, but specifically about PUBG is people in PUBG seem to understand that death can just come from anywhere. And obviously high skill play is possible, but a lot of people, there's a strong element of chance and everyone's sort of just in it together. And sometimes you don't get lucky with drops and things. And because there are no classes or anything, you just, if you find an assault rifle early in the game, you're an assault rifle person now. But it's randomly distributed. There's, to some extent, that means that there's no sort of sense of relative power between teammates. Obviously you have a sense of what each of you is good at. So you give your friend who's a good shot the good shooting rifle, etc. But the problem I have with team multiplayer games a lot of the time is simply that division of power isn't managed well. And Dota is 100% about that, so that's almost fine, because that's literally what the game is about. It's successfully negotiate this social situation, and you'll win. Other team games, Overwatch or Lawbreakers or TF2 or whatever, Destiny, have this sort of breakdown into I know I'm the most important person here, but everyone's sort of fighting each other because everyone thinks they're the most important person in the room. And that seems to coalesce around like sort of star player type attitudes. And therefore my proposed solution is to simply ban making those roles cool. You know?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that is, I like that.
Good.
But I also am a big fan of muting everybody by default because that is something which has made my experience of multiplayer games better. You know, it's that thing.
Oh, that is a serious answer. That is good.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, it's not a
sort
very helpful one. It's not about that then isn't about lowering toxicity. It's about not hearing toxicity, which, you know, it helps in the sense that you are presumably then taking yourself out of that situation and not contributing to it and not sort of exacerbating it or having to engage with it and carrying it with you into other games and things. But at the same time, that's not, you know, that's more just me being tired and grumpy and saying, oh, just shush now.
Well, with that in mind, let's move on to this question from Matt, who writes, Formula E, an electric car racing series, will add Mario Kart-style boost pads to its tracks next year. This is in real life, I should stress. What
in real life?
Yeah.
Or in games?
No, in real life. They're adding boost pads.
In real life?
In real life.
How does that work?
I imagine...
What's a boost pad?
I imagine it'll be something like, because it's electric carts, I imagine the carts might be capped to a certain speed. And
sorry,
therefore...
I thought you meant like this was an actual race with human people.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Human people in the car?
Yeah.
In the car?
Carts.
Cart, okay.
And you know, electric car racing. No, you're right, it is cars, yeah.
But, like, is this like Scalextric?
No.
Or is this like...
Person-sized person cars.
Okay.
I think. Like, I'm 90% sure. Hang on. Like,
okay.
I'm going to Google Formula E just to make sure. Because if it is Scalextric, I don't want to sound like a total dickhead.
No, I'm just confused now.
Let's see. Yeah, no, this is cars.
With humans in them?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're like little Formula 1 cars, hence the formula thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing. And so, I'm not going to totally, claim to know what I'm talking about, but they are adding boost pads.
Okay.
Which is a progress towards the, Wipeout world that I was promised. So I'm very happy about that.
Are they also going to add shells and bananas?
May I continue for the rest of the question?
Cool.
What other video game power-ups should be added to other sports or life? Blue shells at the supermarket to take out the person with a full trolley when you only want some crisps?
I think that... You imagine, though, because the rubber banding in that scenario would then mean that you were at the checkout before you'd even picked up the crisps. You'd just be like, what?
Yeah,
how am I here?
I think you've got to be a little careful with this question because I didn't realize this when I was a child, but there's certain connotations to a lot of power-ups. Like Mario eats big mushroom. He feels real big now.
Okay.
Sonic gets all of the emeralds. He's supersonic now. A metaphor for cocaine? You decide.
Oh, I thought it was just a metaphor for being rich.
Yeah, possibly both. There's, you know...
I didn't have Sonic growing up.
Right.
I was too poor, ironically.
That expensive video game, Sonic the Hedgehog.
Well, I didn't have consoles growing up.
Oh, I see.
Like, my brother... No, my brother did, because he saved up all of his pocket money for 1,000,000 weeks.
Right.
Which is why he then charged me money.
Yeah. Sega boy. But, you know, so there is that. So you could say, like, oh, I'd like a big star that makes me invincible and glittery.
I mean, I would like that.
I can, and like, you can, I suppose there's a difference here between the simple sensation of that and the literal truth of it.
Imagine if you were having to do Christmas shopping last minute in the middle of a crowded shopping centre, say,
It always comes back to shopping.
E.g., the Oracle in Reading, which I remember having a panic attack in, hence, you know. But being powered up with your invincible star and just absolutely striding through crowds, people pinging off you left, right and centre. You just, you get to the rack of the thing, you pick the thing up, you go to the till and you march out like a boss while people sprawl and get out of your way. Imagine heaven, bliss.
I'd like a quad damage power up, but instead of increasing the amount of damage you do by 4, it would increase the amount of money you make from freelance tasks for a limited period of time. That'd be good. That's how I think of damage.
I'd also like some of my weird potions from Oblivion. Like just, do you want to be invisible and on fire?
Why would you want that in real life?
I don't know. I think it might just be fun to try for a bit. And also, they're quite confusing. Maybe I don't want them.
No.
But, I mean, I keep them around for a reason, I guess. I think something that I would really like is the power of persuasion or whatever, You can get, obviously, like, potions and things that, make your charm skill higher in RPGs and stuff. That would be so much more helpful when you're sort of dealing with, a customer service situation or, whatever else. And just sort of...
I think, actually, I know they're adding boost pads to Formula E. I think I want pavement boost pads when I'm walking places.
There's no point because people walk so slowly, you just get stuck behind them even quicker.
They'd be hitting the boost pads as well.
Oh, but they're going so slowly.
That's when you get the shells.
This is the thing, you just need the power to shove.
Indeed, yeah.
Or to say excuse me really loudly.
Which is, the real shove. That'd be a really good... Let's take this the other direction. Just swap that back into Mario Kart. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or like...
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, and then everyone just gets out of the way.
Is it weird that I can't really think of any power-ups that aren't Mario Kart easily?
They are iconic.
It's Mario Kart power-ups or Mario power-ups in general. And then maybe a million miles later, my brain finally goes, what about those weird potions that you made in Oblivion that were absolutely terrible and harmed you as much as they helped you?
There aren't, like, amazing. Like, there's the electric shield that attracts money to you in Sonic. I'd probably have that in real life.
But you'd just get arrested, wouldn't you? Because that's still theft.
Yeah, I suppose it is.
It's it doesn't bestow ownership on you. It just means you've taken someone's money more easily.
Yeah, yeah. You need all the Chaos Emeralds at the same time in order to buy off the police and be immune to their attentions.
Is there anything from Destiny that would be good?
Destiny's not really. It's power ups.
Yeah. I mean, because, like a lot of skills or a lot of power-ups or whatever are sort of geared at solving problems we don't have.
No, hang on. So in Destiny, after you use if a player uses their super, and then when they use their super successfully, like to kill lots of monsters, that generates orbs of light that other players can pick up to charge their own supers faster.
Right.
That would be a good mechanic because it's a cool mechanic, and that would be a good mechanic to apply to real life.
But what would it do? I mean, because it depends on what the core thing that you were amplifying was. Because if someone's super was being a massive asshole, then, you don't really want to perpetuate that, would you? By having, like, the asshole orbs drop.
Fine, well, that idea's dead in the ground, isn't it?
And also with Bants, that's contagious anyway. Maybe that is our power-up. Maybe Bants is orbs.
Maybe Bants is orbs. Next is Melamed, who writes, which is the best drink for podcasting and which is the worst? I think we've been asked this a million different ways. For my money, and I've done a lot of these, that's the sound of some pink wine being poured. Thank you for thinking of me in this trying time.
I didn't think of you very much.
No,
judging by the amount.
That is a hilariously imbalanced pair of wine glasses. I have.
You have like a whole finger of wine.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, one finger of wine, and you have
a whole
hand.
fist of wine. Look, which one of us has been on deadline? Because it was me.
Absolutely. What I was going to say, what I was going to say was, traditional pod drink has always been Morgan Spiced Gold rum, which that always delivers a certain degree of silliness that I approve of. Whiskey gets us into I'm sure I've answered this a million times. Whiskey gets us into the weird hot takes place.
Thing is that you're answering it for your end of the podcast, right? Whereas I'm a bit more like, I'm not a big fan of rum much.
Yeah, true.
And I'm not that into whiskey because I sip it like so slowly that it doesn't really kick in by the time we've got to the end of the podcast. It's just that I can smell whiskey in the room, and that's about the sum total of where that gets me. It's gin that is my drink of choice, and wine that is the thing that goes down quite easily and leads to raucous pudding, I believe.
Yeah, I'd say the worst is not nothing, because that's usually fine. It's like, I always find like ale podcasts. I love ale, but an ale podcast can get a little sleepy.
A cider podcast would see you right off.
Yeah, cider makes me very drunk. Cider's my danger drink. That's the reason I don't drink cider. It's like, that's the thing that gets me. And I say that to somebody, spirit's fine, cider. It's a trap. It's a delicious trap. Our final spread of questions, I just wanted to give a shout out to everybody who responded to our call out for questions with variations on football things. But Hoaxfish writes, and I like this, is coming home an unexplored genre? Well, there's always Gone Home.
Yeah. But that's, not the anticipation element is missing.
That's true. You've already arrived home. I've been gone for 52 years. When can I go home would be the other version of that. Yeah, I think genuinely returns to meaningful environments is tough territory for games to enter, because player doesn't necessarily share those connections to those environments that your player character does. Therefore, it's actually difficult for the video game to ever go home.
I think it depends, because I think coming home is a thing that you struggle with at the start of a game, because unless it is an intensely autobiographical game that you yourself have created or a close personal relational contact has, it won't have that feeling. But I think that towards the end of a game, it's perfectly possible to feel like you've come home to a familiar thing that you started the game in, or that you came to associate with something, and I'm assuming that MMOs are a good candidate for that. There are spaces
that's true.
within that people feel huge.
Wow, we actually got a serious answer out of this.
Well, I mean,
you're right. Games long narrative games are novelistic in scope, and that I think gives them the ability to like create a sense of a journey from an originating point in a way that's quite, gratifying when you do fold back to that first environment or something again.
I suppose it depends, because coming home can kind of mean slightly different things, but I get the sense that it's, generally taken to mean that you are arriving at a place where you feel safe to some degree, and that's kind of an interesting, or at least accepted, or that resonates with you for a deeply personal
also traditionally
reason.
It kind of refers to returning to a prior state. Like it's not just a location, it's not just geographic. It's a change of, and in fact, it's remarkable to me, and it probably isn't even rare that this hasn't been evoked enough in recent times, but you can't go home again. That's the whole point.
Well, but that's the thing that I was getting towards, which was that, it's kind of, it's an interesting thing, because I think I do think it comes up again and again in games, because, often they set up these sort of sanctuary spaces, and then maybe midway through the game, you go back to them and they've been destroyed, you know?
Also, like you Natco people are all bastards.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's like a common
Or you can't go home again because you're level 20 now and you've geared out of it.
Well, it's a common shorthand, that sense of that home is destroyed in some capacity is, it's part of gaming's vocabulary, but also it comes up a lot when I'm talking to people about MMOs, specifically about World of Warcraft, because people have this affection for particular points in time. They have an affection for a particular patch or a particular expansion. And, you can't go back. And it's been a really interesting element of the vanilla WoW conversations that have been floating around, that Nostalrius server and stuff. It's about sort of, whether it's possible to sort of hide away in that world again, or to evoke those feelings of being, I don't know, 20 and able to spend a lot of time, in that game and have that subscription and, whatever else, it's, and I would actually be really interested to see whether the people that were playing on that server were actually getting that out of it, whether it was the experience they hoped it would be, or whether it was an oddly hollow thing, or whether it was, it did provoke that feeling of, I couldn't go back. It's all of the bits are there, but I am not that age again. This is not my life anymore. That. Yeah,
that's actually something that games are particularly bad at featuring within themselves. That's interesting. Like, there's plenty of games, where your home gets destroyed at the beginning or halfway through, or your sanctuary gets destroyed or whatever. But that's not what that phrase means. It's not, you can't go home again because home was destroyed by elves. It's, you can't go home again because you have changed. That's not something that games tend to deal with
Night
much.
in the Woods.
Night in the Woods says, yeah, good point. Interesting.
Yeah, like there are a few, but it's not well trodden in the way that a lot of.
Yeah. But congratulations to Hoaxfish on the comedy football tie-in question that was actually an interesting, sort of thought about games.
Relatedly, I lost the work sweepstake because I drew England.
You lost it the moment you drew England, and then you look like you might win it because you drew England.
It was a very confusing time because I remember I posted the picture of the England flag that I had drawn out of the hat, and observed that I might as well have thrown that £2 in the bin because we'd be crashing out on penalties in the quarterfinals, because that was the last time I engaged with football. But
no, extra time in the semis.
Exactly. This is progress. This is legit progress. So,
It is. Yeah. Football is not coming home, but it is growing stronger and stronger by the moment, like a big old energy ball. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, like the moon. Just as the moon famously does. I need to stop doing this podcast. I'm very tired.
Shall we just draw a veil over it at this point?
Yeah,
it's
indeed.
Fine.
Football's going to bed. It is time to stop. If you sent us a question, thank you very much. If you'd like to send us a question for a future episode of the podcast, you can do so by emailing us the questions at crateandcrowbar.com or tweeting us at crateandcrowbar. Many thanks again to our Patreon backers who make the podcast possible. You can find out more about our Patreon at patreon.com/crateandcrowbar. You can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/crateandcrowbar, where you'll find our episodes in a kind of listenable form where you can also look at a still image. Incredible. If you'd like to find me on Twitter, you can find me at cthurston, which is CTHURSTEN. However, I don't really post on Twitter anymore. I just sort of look at it once a day and go, oh.
Oh dear.
Yeah, well, sometimes oh dear. But that's it, really, isn't it?
I think that'll do us for this one. Did we say it was going to be a short episode?
We did.
Because that was hideously wrong, wasn't it?
It was. Sorry. And thanks for listening, everybody.